Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. With me today is somebody who basically works for our sponsor, Hubbard Radio. Mm-hmm. We are really grateful that they allow us to come in here and use these podcast studios. They're a really great partner of ours. And so it was suggested that we bring in this guest today just to keep that partnership going because we've worked together in the past. So with me today is A.D. Rowntree, and he is the morning guy on KSHE. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we met once before. And it was kind of amazing at the Trans-Siberian Orchestra concert.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us knew what to expect. We had been the beneficiary of, I think it was $1 of every ticket went to Trans-Siberian, $1 of every ticket sale went to us. Mm-hmm. And you came on at the beginning of the show and you presented us a check.
Yeah.
And then we got to, which was amazing, by the way. Shout out to Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And then afterwards, we got to sit down and actually watch the show. And
and what a show it was.
And what a show. It's like a rock opera of the likes of which I've never seen before. And we were we laughed, we cried at times. It was pretty intense.
Oh, the amount of production and pyro they had going during that thing is enough to make Metallica be like, hey, how are they doing this?
Dude, my face was melting. And I feel like when Metallica comes to Busch Stadium, they need to take a, I don't know, they need to talk
take
to the
rock notes.
Yes, exactly. So for those people who don't know, there might be a couple people who don't know about KSHE. Mm-hmm. KSHE's kind of a big deal. Right?
So I'm told, yeah.
Right. So growing up in St. Louis, I don't think I realized that it was a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. You saw Sweet Mead, and my dad worked in construction, so all of his friends listened to KSHE. I don't really think, though, until I was an adult, moved away and came back, that I realized how big of a deal KSHE is. So what's some of the lore about KSHE, and how did you feel when you were asked to come here? Because you're not from here originally.
No, tremendously honored. I'm sort of from everywhere yet nowhere. I was talking to one of my co-hosts, John, man.
Yes.
And we were trading notes. I was like, you've been here, same station, for 46 years. How many times have you moved in your life? He was like, since I was born, 6. He's like, what about you? I was like, 33. And
Whoa.
That discounts the 6 years I spent in the middle, mostly living out of hotels and on tour buses when I was in a band. So no, it was, but KSHE is a legendary thing. I grew up in London, and I remember being at concerts back in the day when I was a kid and seeing all these t-shirts. Sometimes guys in bands would be wearing them. Sometimes people in the audience would be wearing them with, a pig smoking a couple joints on it. And I was just
Right.
like, okay, what's that all about? And then got to America, go on tour, learn about KSHE, learn about it, and understand what just a huge, historically significant behemoth of rock it is. And when I got the call to work here, my boss, the guy who kind of runs everything around here, a guy called Tommy Mattern, he has this thing where he was like, we find talented people and then we work on a way to get them into the building. What are you interested in doing around here? You could be on The Point, you could be on KSHE, you could kind of do anything. And I was like, well, thank you, but I'm only interested in one thing, and that's doing mornings on KSHE. And so it took many years of conversation for the right time to come up, during which time I was doing a bunch of stuff. But I'd known about KSHE since I was a little kid, since I saw the T-shirts in the pits at concerts, and it all led up to this. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and it's cool that it's based here, that it hasn't been, kind of bought out and, conglomerated and all of that stuff. Even when you look in the studio, I know it's since moved a couple of times, but it looks like it's been around.
Well, here's the thing. Big part of my want and desire to come here, besides the fact that I love the company, I love the people, and KSHE's a legendary station. We talk about mental health on this podcast, I guess.
Yes.
But
we'll get there.
A big part of it was that it was here, it was local, and before I'd moved a bunch. The company I worked for before would put you on a station. You'd be there for a few years, then you'd stay on that station as you move somewhere else. So I'd moved around the country a good deal, and I was I was on about 50 stations, and it sounds cool, but I was spread very, very thin.
Yes.
And KSHE, Hubbard, has always been very different situation where it's live, it's local. There's a warmth and a realness to it that you get from being able to focus on one thing that is just not what you hear coming out of the speakers for other stations across the country. So to come here and focus on it and have it be local and fully invested in the community and everything else that a station that's been going this long has was
since
a
the
big
70s,
part of it.
right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty incredible. And
67.
67. And so speaking of, the local aspect and the tie to mental health, I mean, you're here today because Hubbard has been great partners with us. We, one of our board members, Patty Price, has just been an incredible champion, but lots of other people too, in thinking about how we can utilize what we bring to the table as a nonprofit dedicated to reducing and preventing the harms of substance use disorder and promoting mental health. How can we use that, combine it with the platforms that you all have, the resources that you all have, whether that's on air on the radio, whether that's through the digital piece, or like the live spots, and this has nothing to do with us in particular, but at the topic, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, talk about hyper-local. I mean, you were like, maybe I'm wrong, you were in like Jefferson County or something with a bunch of bikers who were riding like against heroin.
Well, it was it was a benefit for a bunch of different things, but it was essentially I was in Cedar Hill, and it was
got
bikers.
Relatives in Cedar Hill.
Yeah,
whoop, whoop.
Yep. Whoop, whoop, Cedar Hill. It was a bunch of bikers. It was called Bikers for Babies, and it was specifically to raise funds and awareness for children that were born addicted to substances.
Which is crazy that they have somebody from KSHE, which is a big radio station, the morning guy, who comes there, highlights the cause, highlights the organization. You go to Cedar Hill. I mean, to go back a step, like if you're working for a different kind of company, you're probably not doing a ton of those things, or maybe you are, but maybe it feels different.
No, I mean, and this was a very specific thing. There's times where you get an opportunity to help, and I have just, through trial and error, mostly error, come to the conclusion that if you ever have an opportunity to help someone and you should just do it. And it was, it was a crowd full of people that their hearts were definitely in the right place, and this is something they've been doing for years. And if we can put a little extra muscle behind it, if we can help raise funds, if we can help raise awareness, if we can just whatever we can bring to it, I think we should whenever we can.
So when the idea was brought to you about doing these promotional spots and talking about these medication disposal bags to dispose of safely, prescription opiates or things like that, medications. Were you voluntold? Did you raise your hand? Had you had some previous experience with prescription medicine where you were like, oh, this is me? This is me.
I've never had a problem with prescription medication, but I knew Prevent+Ed, preventing drug addiction through education is one of the most important things that I think you can do to help a community. So, knowing you guys knowing you folks were involved, I was all in right away. But also, I'm a typical Gen X kid. I grew up skateboarding and riding motorcycles and doing a whole bunch of dumb stuff. And so now those pigeons.
Cool. Were you cool?
I don't know about that, but now those pigeons, those Gen X action sports pigeons have come home to roost, and there's a lot of bones in my body that aren't awesome. So this ankle from doing dumb stuff on half pipes goes out on a regular basis. And the last time it did, I remember I was at the doctor. They were giving me crutches, and I was in tremendous amount of pain, and they're like, okay, so here's your opioid painkillers. I was like, no, I'm good. Just give me the extra strong Tylenol and be good to go. And they're like, well, you should just have them. I was like, I don't want them. And they said, why? I was like, I hear they're very addictive, and I'm not interested in inviting that into my life. And they said, do you have a problem with opioids? I was like, no, I'm not trying to. And they're like, well, just take them just in case. And I was like, you suspect me of having a problem with this, and yet you are handing me a bottle with a street value of God knows what, and I'm having to fight to not take these things. And that was the first time where I was like, oh, I see how this happens. I see how this happens to people that are not thrill seekers. You're out and about in the world of clubs and rock and roll and all of the above, and you see a lot of people doing a lot of things to get to a point where they, are kind of can forget who they are for a little bit,
right.
And escape for a little bit. And the recreational side of it, I get that, I understand that. I understand what motivates it.
Sure,
but the whole, how do you,
curiosity, just whatever, just
yep. And so
escaping, having fun,
that made sense to me. But the notion that people could get addicted post-surgery, post some sort of procedure, I was like, it wasn't really clear to me how that happened. And then I saw up close and personal, I was like, they're literally trying to physically push this bottle of pills into my hand. And I was just like, I had to fight to say no.
And when you have taken time off work, when you have paid, for a certain thing, when we're accustomed to going to a doctor and we need to leave with something. We need to leave with a diagnosis. We need to leave with medicine. Even if we don't have an addiction or a substance use disorder, keeping those things around because we don't want to get rid of them because we've spent our hard-earned money and time and whatever on those things, that can
these things have value.
Exactly, right? And for that person who comes in who, to your house or your kid or whatever who is experimenting, then they don't know. So it's like, how can we get those medications out? Which I know people want to hold on to them.
No, right? There's a dollar value associated with
that's
it.
Right. That's right. So you have done a lot of work even before. From what I understand, your entire career, you've really devoted your time and your platform to mental health and promoting the importance of taking care of ourselves and really, making sure that we're putting our oxygen mask on. So could you talk a little bit about why you decided to use your platform for that? Because some people would be like, no, man, that's my personal business. So I'm not going there.
Oh,
or I'm a rocker. I'm really not going there, you know?
No, I've seen, up close and personal, numerous instances of things going bad for folks. I've been affected by addiction and suicide. I've been affected by people having mental health that's crumbling a little bit. I've been, I've had a pretty close brush with a lot of these things. Never the addiction, fortunately. A lot of, if you give I got a record deal when I was a teenager, and if you give a teenager a credit card,
that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. But if you give a teenager a tour bus and a credit card, there's a certain amount of wrongdoing that can happen. And fortunately, I never got into anything over my head. And then, I do remember I had one conversation. My parents were, were hippies and they knew I was messing around with stuff. My dad was also a lawyer, but I'm this teenager. And once we started to tour internationally and I was getting on planes and crossing borders and stuff, my father said to me, he was like, everything that you've got going on now, all the good stuff that you've got going on, you know how you got a college scholarship and bailed on that to be in this rock band and how you're having a really good time. If you forget that you've got something on you that you shouldn't have and you get on a plane, all of it's over. And because of that, I was just I do misplace a lot of things, I do.
I can totally see that happening.
And I was having such a good time being in a band and making music and all of the above and, seeing the world that I was like, all right, I'm now done with anything that could get me into jail. So I was able to set that aside. But, a lot of people I know have not so much. And you see it, you see the painful effects that it has on people. You see lives it ruins. And, then you experience the collateral damage yourself of being like, we're supposed to play a show and this guy can't sit up, so it's, I've never wanted to, it's not necessarily my thing, but it's one of my things. And that happened. And then there was a really profound moment where I was in San Diego and a veterans organization came to tour the radio station. A bunch of listeners came in from the local VA, and these guys were guys who, better, stronger, more accomplished men than I will ever be. These are guys that, combat veterans that stare death in the eye and being like, yeah, bitch, what else do you got?
Bring it.
Yeah. And I was like, you've done so much for us. Like I'm a goofball that plays Zeppelin and makes fart jokes on the radio. What could I possibly do for you? And I'll never forget this veteran who is like probably in his 60s, battle-hardened dude, looks at me. He's like, anything you can do to make it easier to talk about mental health is very important. And that is how you can give back to us, because we all advocate for it, but it can be very difficult advocating for yourself. And I think there's that big barrier where a lot of people will be like, you should talk to someone about that. And then when it's time for you to talk to someone about something, it's difficult. There's shame and weakness associated with all of it. And so I was just like, if these guys, with everything they've seen, done, and been through, can struggle with this, and if that's what they ask me to do when I have an opportunity to do it, why the hell would I not?
It is really profound. And, we've had similar conversations with Learn, with Rafe, but also with Anthony Stalter. And what I appreciate about what they have said, and you've said something like very similar. It's like, you have been through hard work and time. You've been given a platform, right? And this is a tool that you have. So the fact that you can use it to elevate topics like mental health, in addition to, cute dogs and, stuff like that, like all important, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to break down you could say stigma, you could say prejudice, where somebody can listen and go, oh, he's just like me, or she's just like me, or I like rock music and I love, heavy metal, but I also get really sad sometimes, and that's okay. Like it's a gift that even being here today, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, like even being here today and being a musician, being on KSHE and being able to sit here and talk about mental health and why it's important and how you've been impacted by substance use disorder and suicide, like that is a gift that is far more valuable to us than if you wrote a check.
Oh, well, no,
I mean, honestly,
I 100% agree with that. Only because, I did, we did an event for the American Society or American Foundation for Suicide Prevention last Friday.
Is that the walk?
No, this was a beach volleyball event.
Oh, cool, fun.
And there was a whole bunch of people there, and it was a fun time, and it was glow-in-the-dark beach volleyball,
Cool.
and the people that organized it were fantastic, and an organization called Spike Out Suicide, hence volleyball. Yeah,
I'm gonna write that down.
I love them. You should meet them. You should hang out.
That's pretty great.
You should all go bowling or play volleyball
or
together.
play volleyball.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm terrible.
And
but let's do it.
they were very passionate about the cause, and they had all these fantastic fundraising things that they were doing, and they were kind of focused on that. I was like, that's great, and I hope you do well, and I think they did. But the real value is, you've gathered a bunch of people here together. You put smiles on their faces doing something fun, and you've also united a bunch of folks in the knowledge that this is real. We're talking about it. And I think that can literally be a life-saving thing. So if you can do these things in a context where it's not a big, heavy conversation, I think a lot of the time, I hate using this word because I feel like it's been overused recently, but it does normalize talking about this stuff. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And I have a whole bunch of stuff going on up here. A lot of people, like I said, will tell me like, oh, you're so, like happy-go-lucky and upbeat and positive. I was like, take some work. It's a constant and daily management of this stuff. I have really bad ADHD. I have really bad depression. I am very badly dyslexic, which, it led to me being sat in the back of the class and told I was stupid when I was a kid. And so, you walk around with this stuff your whole life, and then you kind of figure out the appropriate workarounds for it. And I think when I find something that works for me, I want to share it a little bit. And I do notice, like, you can't you can't go on the air and go, hey, anybody else depressed? But I do, like, anybody else think everything effing sucks and can't be bothered?
Anyone else have a hard time getting out of bed this morning? I did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do find but whenever I've talked about depression even a little bit, or any kind of mental health issue on the air even a little bit, it's like a floodgate opens.
It is.
And people reach out to me online, the phones light up, and you just know people are going through it and feeling it every single day. So I will tell you this as well. I do my very best. Like, it's goofy fart jokes and Led Zeppelin and slap ass humor and all of the things that we do, which I love because, it's fun. Right. But it's my job if you're listening to me, it's my job to get you out of the car happier than when you got into it and ready to kick your day in the junk. That's sort of the mindset I go in with every single day. And I find focusing on that, other people's happiness, is more often than not going to be the thing that helps me leave my garbage at home. So it's, in a way, trying to brighten someone's day is a bit self-serving, but, radio is what it is, but, and it's fun and it's companionship and everything else, but it is my little way of trying to leave the world a bit better than I find it every single day, and hopefully turn somebody's frown upside down.
Right. So you mentioned that you read, and so I'm wondering if
looks like we got ourselves a reader.
Well, what I was going to ask is, is that something you do kind of to release? I mean, I know you have a dog. So what do you do? Are you one of those people that just loses yourself in books and that's sort of how you rejuvenate? I mean, because I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that as extroverted as you are, there's a huge part of you that really needs to recharge once you're on. See,
I'm not at all. I think a lot of people in radio are extroverts. I am, when I'm not doing this, when I'm not working, I'm kind of done talking. Right. I'd much rather listen than talk.
It's draining, isn't it? It is so draining.
Well, I think that's how they define it. Introvert, extrovert is not, do you like going out? It's does being out and about with people take energy, or is it something that you use to recharge? And I love people, and I think it's so good to get outside of yourself and all of the above, but it's work. My wife and I have this expression, which is, I want to have fun, but I'm tired.
Yes.
All this stuff sounds great, but so the things I do to kind of I'm a big believer in talk therapy. There have been times where I've sought it out.
Preach, I had a therapy session this morning.
Yeah, no, I'm overdue for some more. So there's that. I also, I found the two things consistently that help me manage my state of mind are exercise and meditation. I go to the gym 3 times a week, not because I'm a gym bro or any of the above, but I find if the 4th of July weekend where we had 2 days off, that meant, 2 days I wasn't in the gym, the Friday before and the Monday after, and I felt it by Tuesday. Mm-hmm. When that rolled around, I'm like, I am itchy. I am,
it's weird. Neurotransmitters, man, and the flood of the dopamine and the endorphins and everything. I mean, like you said, even if you're not a gym bro rat type of thing, it's just, and it's the routine too for a lot of people.
It is the stability of the routine. My wife jokes with me, but I rely heavily on routine and things being a certain way, as I'm very much a lucky underwear person in the way I go through life. And, she'll be like, you want to watch this movie? I'm like, no, can't. Haven't seen the first one yet, and this is a sequel. And she'll always say to me, sure are a lot of rules. I'm like, yes, they are, and they keep everything afloat.
That's right. They keep everything going here. The trains are running on time. Don't mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. But so I do, my last therapist, I remember once saying to him, I was like, I think I'm depressed. He was like, oh yeah. Yeah, yes.
Newsflash, you are.
Yeah, you're very badly depressed. And, at the time there was a bunch of stuff going on. He's like, and if you weren't, I'd be worried because you'd be a sociopath. And I was like, cool. So
I'm not a sociopath.
Yeah,
Sweet.
And I was like, can you prescribe me something for that? And he was like, I could, but that would affect your personality. How important is your personality? Because I've heard your show. And I was like, personality sort of pays the mortgage. And he was like, why don't you exercise? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, if you can commit to exercising 3 times a week to the point of sweating and getting your heart rate up, it releases a lot of the same serotonin reuptake inhibitors into your bloodstream directly without having to go for meds. And I was just like, okay, I like sedentary and donuts but so I did it, and I was like, oh, damn, if he wasn't right, I do feel better about stuff. And so that's a big part of how I manage it. And then I discovered I discovered like transcendental meditation. All the people that I care about the most in this world, Howard Stern, Jerry Seinfeld, the Beatles, the guys in Beastie Boys, all these people that I put up on a pedestal for many years, they all swear by it. And I was like, yeah, seems to be good for creative folks. Why don't I give that a go? And so every single morning before I go to work, whether it's, I got time for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and
this is what, like 3 a.m?
Like
4 in the morning?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow.
And it's crazy thing, because I used to just do it in the afternoon because it seems weird. Like, okay, I'm up. Now it's time to relax. But it just makes a big difference in terms of all of that stuff.
Do you use an app, or do you just kind of...
Started with an app and then got to the point where I didn't feel like I needed it. And just there's I think it's still available on the App Store. It's a weird place to get your meditation.
It's not. That's what we teach teenagers. We just did a leadership camp, and one of the these are for high schoolers, and one of the sessions was about stress and how to manage and how to cope, just with life stress, but then also when they've got like some significant stuff happening in their lives. And we were giving them all of these different apps, and they were automatically took out their phones and were downloading them. One girl used it that night.
There's a guy called Russell Simmons who was responsible. He ran Def Jam Records. He was responsible for Beastie Boys and Run DMC and all of these folks. And he got very big into meditation. He has an app called Meditation Made Simple. And I've always heard about the transcendental meditation, but you got to go to school. You got all this sort of stuff. And it's, it's a big investment of time and a certain investment of money. And he was like a lot of great hip hop moguls, he basically took it and remixed it. And he was just like, he said, like, if you want to go to a transcendental meditation school, you might learn something quite similar to this, or you might find this is all you ever need. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So I learned how to do transcendental. I learned how to transcendentally meditate from Russell Simmons' app. Whoa. And then, he gives you a mantra, and I've just, held on to that one ever since. And
do you pick your? I'm not asking you what it is. Do you pick your own mantra? Or
no, he gives it to you.
He gives it to you.
Yeah, and and it, it made sense to me when I discovered like the logic behind it. Meaning, you're focusing on one thing that is meaningless, and it sort of settles down the rest of your stuff and allows you to I guess, think differently and free your mind up in certain ways. And I'll never forget when I was growing up with my one of my favorite things to do was to play catch with my dad, not only because I loved baseball and it was time with my dad and everything else, but I found I had the best conversations with him while doing that. And when I put it all together, I was like, oh, that's because we're not focused on the conversation. We're focused on the ball. So our mind is going interesting in different places. And those were the times where I really, really managed to connect.
When we do a lot of education sessions, like parent meetings for parents of middle and high school students, and middle in particular, right? Mm-hmm. They had this like sweet child that loved them, and now middle school, it's like, all hell is breaking loose, and they're like, what happened to my child? Well, a big part of the parent meetings is all about the brain science, because where they're interpreting information will depend on how they're receiving the information. And so where they're interpreting it in their brain depends on how they're actually going to receive it. So if you just say, hey, would you mind taking the trash out? Where they're getting that is in their emotion center, and they hear you saying, why can't you take the trash out? And that's why they're like, oh, why are you always yelling at me? And you're like, I'm not really yelling. You're always yelling at me. But anyway, a solution to that, because the eye contact, particularly from middle and high schoolers, is really intimidating.
Right.
Well, we're always telling kids, like, look us in the eye. Well, that's like, we're basically like drawing laser beams to their emotion center, like asking them to fight off, right?
Yeah.
And so we suggest like doing something. playing basketball, try to have a conversation in the car. I mean, isn't that when the conversations that are best always happen? When you're on like a road trip and like you just get lost in the conversation because you're not paying attention to that person sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
You're like looking at the cows on the side of the road, or, you know, the radio in the background or whatever.
Yep. And I do find meditation is probably the closest thing the things that I used to look for from substances and alcohol. The closest I can get to that is through meditation. You know, like you're looking for a change in your state of mind. You're like, you had a long day. Yep. You want to crack a couple cold ones and hang out and talk with, you know, your buddies or what have you, or you want something that gets you out of whatever it is that sucked.
Yes.
And so, you know, like the meditation I find it helps me set aside anger, frustration, you know, anxiety, sense that the world's going to come to a crashing halt or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Like 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, that hasn't changed, but my response to it has. In the same way that I think, you know, your response changes to stuff after 9 or 10 Heinekens.
Totally. Wow. This was a great conversation, A.D.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you had an early morning, so thanks for sticking around and doing this with us. Really appreciate you. If you liked what you heard, please consider rating, reviewing, or subscribing. That would be awesome to the Preventable podcast. Thank you so much.
Can I come back? This was
fun.
All right,
anytime.
Sweet.
Standing invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.